Esther chapter 2 records the way in which Esther ended up being queen, and it is emphasised that it wasn't just because of her beauty, but it was because of her character as well. For though she needed to have physical beauty, because that was the expectation of the role of queen, and generally the role of women in the presence of great men, yet she was also a woman of intelligence, a gentle and quiet spirit, although we're not given the details of this. But it is evident that she stood out from the rest of the young women, and the implication is that this is because of her heritage as a Jew, the hardships of her life. She was an orphan, brought up by her cousin, but that he had provided for her, so that the man in charge of the young women during their preparation recognised her character straight away, and when she went before the king, she made a great impression on him, so the king delighted in her. Mordecai instructed her, though, not to reveal the fact that she was Jewish, because the Jewish people as such were despised by so many of the proud people in the court and in the society. And so she appeared just as one of the people, but she was one of the people that God had his hand on, and this is a significant reason why her character was as it was. So when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter to go to the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised, and Esther obtained favour in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favour in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces, and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. So Ahasuerus was really excited with his new queen. The end of Esther chapter 2 reminds us that while all the attention is being given to Esther, yet Mordecai is supporting her, sitting in the king's gate, even though he can have no direct contact with her. Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious, and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles, in the presence of the king. Mordecai spent his time at the gate of the king's court, because he was not permitted to enter the court. There were two doorkeepers there, gatekeepers, and he heard them speaking of their schemes to kill the king. Mordecai was able to pass a message through his friends to Queen Esther that this was their plan, and Esther passed the information on to the king in Mordecai's name, probably also through an intermediary. But the matter was investigated by King Ahasuerus' security. It was found to be true, and these two doorkeepers were hung, and the matter was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. And so time goes on. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Habanatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. So in the beginning of the book we saw that the king had 7 counsellors that he took advice from. But now we find that another man, Haman, exalts himself, speaking to the king the things that the king wants to hear. And so the king promotes him above all the other princes. Because this man is now exalted, he wants everyone to think highly of him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we read from the end of Esther chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 3, the transition in the kingdom of King Ahasuerus. As the time goes on, and Haman has promoted himself, and the king has promoted Haman, recognised him as the lead counsellor, and given honour to Haman, so that people should acknowledge Haman and therefore acknowledge the king. But Mordecai saw through the pride of Haman, and he also, as a Jew, knew he would not bow down to a man as if he were God, to pay homage to him. He saw through Haman as a man, and he refused to bow down to him. And when others questioned him about it, he explained that he was a Jew, the implication being that a Jew would only bow to God and would not bow to a man. Mordecai had told Esther not to reveal her Jewishness, but here, when he was pressed, he did reveal his Jewishness as the reason for not following the crowd. Those around reported all this to Haman, to see what Haman would do, for Haman could report it to the king. The king had instructed people to honour Haman, so in not bowing down to Haman, Mordecai was honouring God, but was not honouring the king. There are situations where we must make that choice. It's the same choice that Daniel's friends Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego had made when they refused to bow down to the image of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now we have Haman filled with wrath. He is a proud man, but he is also a schemer. He doesn't seek counsel from others. He schemes within himself that he must get rid of not only Mordecai, but all the Jewish people. We're not given particular details, except that he's called the Agagite, and we have come across the name of Agag before. Agag was king of the Amalekites in the time of King Saul, and the Lord had told King Saul to destroy all the Amalekites, but he had kept the king alive. Samuel executed that Agag, but the name has persisted through the centuries. It's likely that this Haman was descended from the Amalekites, who were the enemies of the Jews since the time of Moses. Haman saw an opportunity not just to be rid of one man, to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. And this is just one more episode we see in the scriptures where Satan wants to wipe out the people through whom God has chosen to bless the world.